Welcome to the Real Chili Podcast.
And the Golden Eagles of Marquette University in Milwaukee are bound for the Final Four for only the third time ever.
5 seconds left. Marquette down by one, trying to avoid the upset. Blue the drive, the left hand. It's good. 1 second to play. Vander Blue has put Marquette in front by one.
And I want to win every day as basketball players, as students, and I want to win every day, most importantly, as people.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Real Chili Podcast. My name is Mike Lavender. I'm joined by Brian Henry, Pete Mohan, and coming directly from his couch, Pete Worth. We are coming to you on the late night version of the Real Chili Podcast, really the only way that Real Chili should be experienced. Marquette just capped off an 81-49 victory over Howard University, and at this point, we've got a small sample size, but we are 2 games into the Marquette basketball season, and we've got a lot of positive things to talk about. We've seen some good strides from the defense. We've got shooters abound. Pete Mohan, I want to throw it to you first. Watching this Howard game, there were a lot of things that continued carry over from the Vanderbilt game, and there were a couple of things that didn't. What impressed you?
Well, I think the one thing that we need to take away from the first 2 games is depth. This team has gone 11 deep, I think, in both games. Essentially, everyone's played, and not only that, but I think Luke Fisher is the other story. He was dominant against Vandy. He came to play again. Luke Fisher is going to be a very key component of our success going forward. We don't have the depth behind him that we do in the backcourt, clearly.
You're exactly right when you talk about depth. I mean, again, we have a small sample size, but in both games, in the second half, we started to wear the other team down on both sides of the ball, and that's where we really mounted our lead. I'm not ready yet to attribute that, Brian Henry, to coaching changes or coaching strategies that took hold in the second half. Maybe that is the case, but I really do think our bodies and our depth are wearing them down. We just have more people who can put the ball in the hole that we can run out on court.
2 words, bombs away. First game against Vanderbilt, 13 for 31 from behind the arc. Tonight against Howard, 9 for 21. Fellas, that's a team that's shooting over 40% from 3. Yes, very small sample size, but in all the preview podcasts we did, I don't think there was a bigger fact that we circled back to more was they needed shooting, to relieve, to give Luke Fisher a chance to work inside. That has happened. Thank God Luke appears to be healthy after what happened tonight. They are shooting the ball at a high clip. You're absolutely right. When Hauser sets his feet, you think everyone's going in. But everyone else seems improved. Tracy Carter seems to have a better release. Everybody on the perimeter you feel good about. Even Reinhardt, even though, again, a high-volume guy, but he's got a real nice release. The ball's got a nice high parabola. It's very, very encouraging.
Didn't know you knew that word, Brian. Jeez.
You planned out saying that ahead of time, didn't you?
Absolutely not. That's what it is. Well,
he tripped over a math book today, and it popped open to the parabola page.
When I play pickup basketball and I let rainbow top of the key threes go, I yell out parabola as I let it go. That's part of my game. But Pete Worth, wouldn't you agree that the shooting aspect has to be the most encouraging sign right out of the gate?
Well, absolutely, and especially from the freshmen. You mentioned 9 for 21, 6 out of 8 between the 2 freshmen, and Sam Hauser and Marcus Howard. And you have a good feeling when you got 2 guys that they get the ball wide open on a kick out, and you feel really confident. And that's a huge boost for this team. I thought Marcus Howard and Hanif, Hanif missed his only 2 3-point chances tonight, but I thought those 2 were the MVPs of the game, especially in the beginning part of the first half when we were still kind of adjusting to that ridiculous Howard defense that Michigan also had a tough time with in the early going. But when you realize that their players are just kind of like long and athletic, but they're pretty undisciplined and just jumping up and down, basically trying to get deflections. Mark, especially after a few turnovers, his drive and one, I think, Brian, you talked about it when we were watching the game. I thought that was a pivotal moment for Marquette. It was like, okay, here's the way that we can beat these guys, and this is the way we do it, by attacking this zone and kicking it out, moving the ball around, and they certainly did that.
Before we transition to talking a little bit more about how we handled that zone, I wanted to make a point about the three-point shooting, and I think it's a caution to throw out there. Yes, we have better shooters. Yes, we've looked a hell of a lot better shooting the ball. But getting caught up in the stats, we've had a lot of garbage time in these past two games. That's really started at about the 10-minute mark in the second half. So relying solely on those stats is a barometer. It's going to be interesting to see. We're going to see it this Thursday against Michigan. We're going to see it against either Pitt or SMU. And a lot of teams going forward is what's our shooting, particularly our three-point shooting, going to look like when we're in a 40-minute battle or a 35-minute battle. We haven't seen that yet.
Absolutely, and I don't think any of us here are delusional. I think those of us that paid attention around the Big East tonight, if you watched that Villanova-Purdue game, that was high-level, fun basketball, and if you watch that Villanova team, that is not going to be a fun team to play against. We're a long ways away from that, but on its surface, compared to the previous 3 seasons where this hasn't been an NCAA tournament team, there were shooters on the floor, at least 3 at a time, that could stretch it. I just think that's a very baseline thing that we were all hoping for. It looks like it's there. You're absolutely right. They have to be able to do it against better competition and for over a 40-minute game and do it in crunch time situations. We'll see if they can do it, but encouraging signs early on.
I think one of the encouraging things that you mentioned, neighbor Pete, is just that the freshmen are already hitting. If they can come in and hit right away, it shows that they're confident out there. Now, we haven't even seen Rousey and Dwayne really get involved from the three-point line yet either. So Rousey hasn't hit a three-point shot yet in 6 attempts. It's only a matter of time before he hits the bottom a few times. So the fact that there are this many shooters, that you're going to have these times where certain guys go into drought and other guys get hot, that's how you have a team that will have a consistently high three-point percentage throughout the season by having multiple guys and not just relying on one guy who may or may not be hitting that night.
So, folks, one of the dangers of calling in to participate in the Real Chili podcast directly from your couch is that you may drop a call at some point, particularly if you're in the middle of nowhere, Illinois. So we've lost Pete Worth for the time. We'll see if we can get him back on. But he did make a good point before he fell asleep, and that was the way we were able to attack a zone. When they brought that zone out, we knew it was coming. They did the same thing against Michigan. Howard did. And, of course, I'm having flashbacks to Jim Boeheim in Syracuse. Not that Howard is anywhere near that level. But I didn't have any confidence, and we hadn't seen it yet, that they could break that zone. It took them a little while. It took them a good part of the first half. But I particularly remember a play where Rousey got into the middle, did a little head fake, went around, got by some people taller than him, and that was the first time I could see us beating the zone. Is there any key that you guys saw when we kind of eventually broke it down during the course of the first half?
Mike, even though Vanderbilt played man-to-man in that first game, next to the shooting being, the thing we're most excited about, their ball movement this early in the season, regardless of the defense it's against, but especially against the zone tonight, is wildly exciting. The ball, in the second half, both games, we've seemed to have started slow on both, but in the second half of both, the ball goes from wing, from top of the key to wing to corner. They drive, cut, move off it really well, and guys are getting open. This is the best we've seen them move the basketball under Wojo in his 3 years, hands down.
I thought Wayne Wilson was especially effective today in finding guys on the swing pass or on the skip pass, or whether it was finding Reinhardt in the middle at the free throw line. And Reinhardt especially, I thought, was an extremely effective zone killer. He was able to get, with ease, get the ball at the elbow or at the free throw line and make that mid-range jumper. And him combined with the slashing ability that Juwan has brought to the table, those guys with the ability to score from the interior of the defense, with Luke occupying the space at the rim, just makes us that more effective at being able to beat the zone when you add that to our three-point shooting ability.
Folks, we've got Pete Worth back in the house. And Pete, we were just talking about the zone and how Caton Reinhardt and how Andrew Rousey and how several different folks, Dwayne Wilson, played a role in breaking down that zone. What did you see, being a former star high school basketball player, what did you see in breaking down that
Star high school basketball player.
What did you see in breaking down the zone for Marquette in this game?
Well, I'd just like to preface that star adjective by
shooting
saying,
star, perhaps?
By saying that, robust, maybe like 8.5 points per game and almost as many turnovers per game. Doesn't typically constitute as a star. But anyway, I really liked Marcus Howard, and I especially liked Hanif Cheatham in the first half. I think he kind of righted the ship when we were turning the ball over and taking some poor shots. I think Hanif was the one that really kind of initiated the trend to break down that zone as opposed to settling on the perimeter and passing it around the perimeter and trying to force up bad shots. But yeah, I mean, eventually with a team like that, they're going to wear down. And what you have to do throughout the game is continue to attack, and eventually, 5 or 6 of our guys, like you mentioned, Reinhardt, Dwayne, all those guys did that really well. I mean, you can tell that they've been coached to do that, and they did a good job of it.
Brian mentioned the ball movement. I think that's evident looking at the box score and seeing that we have 22 assists on 29 made shots. Any game that you do a percentage like that, you're gonna be having pretty good ball movement, and that means you're getting your guys easy shots. And I think that's what we saw tonight against Howard. One thing that I did think we did better in this game than the Vanderbilt game, and something we need to watch going forward against opponents, is against Vandy, we were only able to get to the line 5 times. Tonight, we made it to the line 18 times against Howard, and I think that's a key in building our Big East ready squad by the time conference season rolls around. Is can we get to the line consistently and hit free throws?
Yeah, that's a great point about the free throws, because I was at the Vandy game, and just there was something odd about the way the refs called that game. Not that it went against Marquette, even though it did, but it just didn't seem on par. And I understand the refs are humans too and trying to get involved in the season. But looking at the box score from the Howard game, not only did we get to the line 18 times, we shot 77.8%, and no one missed more than one free throw. So we had a really solid line at the night, and that's something that we haven't seen in the past, even from players who were expected to do that. So I think you're exactly right, Pete. That's a promising sign, whereas if we're in these tight games in the Big East, which are typically called pretty fairly, or equally, I should say, that's going to be a key feature that we've added with some of these shooters that have come in.
We are going to play teams that are longer. We're going to get a great test against Michigan later this week that are quicker defensively, and we are not going to be able to get as many open looks as we'd like. Hauser, for as well, again, not the quickest kid in the world, even despite how good his shot is. He may struggle against a team like that to get his shot off. So we need to get to the rim. All right, Juwan Johnson and Dwayne Wilson need to get to the basket and draw fouls. You're absolutely right, Mike. That was very encouraging to see them get to the line like that. Take it with a grain of salt, because Howard was disastrous on both ends of the floor. But again, for 2 games in, very encouraging. I think we're all fairly happy, and I think we're very eager to see what they look like against what many consume to be a potential NCAA tournament team in Michigan.
So when Luke Fisher went down, I'm sure we all saw that. He kind of, the shoulder that he's had some issues with in the past, he went to the locker room. Turns out he came back and was cleared to play. But when he was out, we went to a smaller lineup and had some pretty good success with it. I think Caton and Hauser were switching between the 4 and the 5 at times in that lineup, but that gives you a sense of how high it was going. And we had some moderate success against a Howard team that a small lineup matches well with. What did you guys think about going to that small lineup rather than bringing in Helt to have a bigger post presence?
Helt's just not a guy you can rely on right now. I mean, he doesn't have the experience. He's not quite D1 caliber ready, I don't think. And so it's definitely when you're playing athletes like that, and like they will see even better ones. Howard had pretty good ones that couldn't even barely hit the rim. When you get guys that are that athletic and can actually make shots, it's going to be a problem. So I didn't expect. I'm not surprised by the fact that we went small, especially with the matchup.
Here would be my question to the group. I really enjoyed watching that lineup. I thought it was interesting. But that said, why not get Helt minutes in a game you've pretty much got locked down just for the sake of experience and being out there?
He did get minutes.
He got minutes, but he didn't. I think his longest stretch was that second media. He had Fisher play the first 7.5 minutes of the game. Helt came in and played that third segment media timeout for about 3.5 minutes, and then they went back and sat him. And he never played a stretch longer than 3 minutes in the game. My question is there will be a game this year where Luke gets in foul trouble or, God forbid, gets hurt, and you're going to be up against Xavier, and he's going to have to play. Again, we're probably dead in the water if that happens. I'm just curious, if you're a coaching staff, do you try to get him minutes here early on in games like that?
I think if you're treating these early season games against perceived cupcake teams as almost glorified exhibitions, Helt, he already plays one position. He just plays one position, and he gets those minutes in practice as a center going against Luke. Hauser is a guy that we need to be versatile. Same with Reinhardt. We need to get minutes for those guys in these strange positions now so that they're getting comfortable playing multiple positions, because Luke will get in foul trouble. And maybe, depending on the matchup, we do want to go small. So getting those guys minutes now in positions that they're not comfortable normally playing, I think is key to our experience going forward.
Pete, what I wanted to, you watch a lot of, you have watched a lot of college basketball. For a player like Fisher, do you think they can get away playing him 30 minutes a game for an entire season? Do you think he can stand up to that for the guys he's going to have to guard for potentially 35 plus games this year? Because we obviously need him out there. I guess I'm just looking at, can he withstand the physical pounding of that for a full season?
Well, the answer is I don't know. He's never really done it before. He's tried. He was one of our main contributors last year, but he was in foul trouble all the time. So he hasn't proven that he can stay out of foul trouble. Look at tonight. He had 4 fouls. Some of those were ticky-tack, but a lot of that stemmed from the fact that they drove the lane a lot, and yeah, granted, threw up terrible shots. But they were able to.
We can't stress that enough. How bad Howard is.
They were so bad. They were atrocious. It was gross. The shots that they chucked up there. Their best player, that Miller guy, he shot. His shooting form was like.
Makes Joakim Noah's jump shot look like J.J. Redick's.
Yeah, it was Joakim Noah. The way his hands were situated on the ball. They packed it in the paint and got a lot of offensive rebounds on us. And if they could have just actually made some layups, we face a good team with a lot of athletes that can exploit that, it's going to be tough for Luke to stay out of foul trouble, one, and to absorb the pounding that he's going to get. So I'm skeptical of it, to be honest.
All right, fellas, it's that time. We want to make some predictions for the Michigan game coming up here on Thursday evening in the 2K Classic. So, Brian Henry, I'm going to throw it to you first. We've done this a few times now. I want to hear whether you think Marquette gets a win, loss, by how much, and what do you think some of the key factors are going to be?
This is the game, at least for the early season ones. Everybody was excited for Vandy because it was number 1. I think this is our first, I don't want to give them the elite title, but a good basketball team that we're going to face that we know going into the year is probably an NCAA tournament team. The matchup I'm looking forward to in this game is going to be Caton Reinhardt having to guard Duncan Robinson of Michigan. I think that's going to be very telling throughout for the season how Caton will guard athletic wings that can handle the ball. We'll see a few of them in the Big East. I think it's going to be a really tight game, neutral floor. Maybe Michigan by a bucket. I think it's tight, and I think we hang in there. They're a little deeper than us. Beeline's a good coach. It could go either way. I'll say Michigan by a deuce.
All right, Pete Mohan, being another native son of the state of Michigan, what do you got for this game?
Well, I think the thing that you need to look at is that this is a B-line team, and whenever you go up against a B-line team, it comes down to how well do they shoot the three-point ball. If they're making threes, they can beat anyone by 20. If they're missing threes, they could lose to anyone by 15. And I think that turns into a three-point shooting contest. I think that Marquette will prevail, though. I think that I'm just that impressed with our guards so far. I say Marquette by 6.
Pete Worth, before you pass out on your couch tonight, what do you got for the Michigan game for us?
Well, just kind of analyzing their roster and looking into a couple of their 2 previous games this year. One was against Howard, and then the other one against Uwe Pui. It seems like these 2 teams are made up very similarly, and I do think that what kind of like Pete said, whoever's shooting the ball better from 3, the most likely will prevail. But I think that they're not. First of all, they're not nearly as deep as us, and I think that we can exploit them over time. And if Luke has a big game, they have nobody really to match up against Luke. Their big man is a sophomore and more of kind of an outside player. So I think if we can actually find Luke more often and get him going down low and be able to kick it out to our shooters, I think that's the way we win. And I think we'll be able to do that against a Michigan team who's experienced, but I don't think all that super talented. And Duncan Robinson, like Brian said, has struggled out of the gate. If they can contain him, I think Marquette's will do it. I think that's the strategy. I think Marquette wins by 4.
I just want to add one thing. The other big match, this will be our first time playing a true, legit point guard. Derek Walton of Michigan's an all Big Ten point guard. He's a senior. That'll be fun to see our young Marcus Howard and hopefully what we deem to be our lead point guard, Tracy Carter, play well against him because he'll be their best challenge so far to date this season.
They won't turn it over very much, so we're going to have to definitely create points on our own.
I just want to say one more thing. We're obviously only covering the first round here in our predictions, but I think that we will get greedy for banners and hang a banner
Tom Crean
for the 2K Classic.
Oh,
that's freeway.
No, that's what Crean would do. He wanted to hang banners for the Great Alaskan Shootout and Maui and all sorts of ridiculous stuff.
We need that banner.
He got that from Freeway.
All right, folks, you can tell that it's late night here at the Real Chili Podcast. We've got
after hours, people.
We've got 2 wins predicted, one by 6 and one by 4, and we've got a loss predicted by 1. I'm really going to focus in on DJ Wilson here. I think he's had a great couple of first games this season. He started off that way last season, but kind of slumped off when he faced stiffer competition. I'm not sure Marquette is going to be that stiffer competition this year. I think DJ Wilson has another big game. I think Michigan, as Brian just mentioned, has a slight advantage in their backcourt players. So I'm going to give this to Michigan by 3, 1 shot. I think it's a heartbreaker, but I think we will carry on to play either Pitt or SMU. So that's my prediction. So we got 2 wins, 2 losses. Fellas, any quick final thoughts before we sign off and move on to the Michigan to the interview with Brendan Quinn of MLive?
I think it's worth noting, Mike, that your parents go to church with John Beeline. I think it should be put out there.
They do. They share pews with him from time to time.
Is that St. Francis?
Yeah.
Have they ever held hands on the Our Father?
I don't know. Maybe the sign of peace at some point.
That would be an important part of the scouting report that they could.
Your dad's not a tithe collector, is he, Mike?
From time to tithe. All right, folks. That's going to do it for Mike Lavender, Brian Henry, Pete Mohan, and Pete Worth. We're going to hang up the phone, and then I'm going to get Brendan Quinn of MLive, the Michigan men's basketball beat reporter, on the phone, and we'll do an interview with him to get you ready for the Michigan matchup later this week. Today we have Brendan Quinn, who works for MLive and covers the Michigan basketball beat in addition to the Michigan State basketball beat. Brendan, welcome to the Real Chili Podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys.
As you know, later this week, on Thursday, Michigan and Marquette University are both participating in the 2K Classic. So we wanted to bring you on and get a little closer look at the Michigan basketball program. Michigan is a program that I'm intimately familiar with, having grown up in Ann Arbor. This is the 10th season for Coach John Beilein, and the past couple seasons have been more mediocre than the previous three. Michigan's had some quite some big success going to the NCAA championship game and having a number of long runs in the NCAA tournament. Brendan, looking at Michigan basketball this year, what are you expecting out of this program in a big picture sense? What steps do you think they're going to take forward based on what they looked like last year?
John Beilein will be looking to kind of add some stability back to the program. The thing was rolling along there for a minute, and the last 2 years kind of fell off into the periphery a little bit in the Big Ten and lost some of the momentum that had been built. Fans here kind of really expected, to capitalize on a run to the Final Four and then a run to the Elite Eight. They really thought it was going to create a big boon in recruiting, like every fan base always does. Everyone always expects it's going to, you go to a Final Four and then that'll just roll from there. It doesn't really work that way in college basketball. You can ask any number of programs, even in the last 10 years. You look at your Georgia Techs, places like that have tasted it and then just didn't kind of turn that into sustained success. Michigan, for all the success it had in the late 80s, winning the 89 national championship, and then obviously all the Final Four or the Fab Five stuff in the early 90s, it fell off the map. And Beilein, to his credit, brought that thing back. And now I think it's kind of a pivot point in his tenure where he needs to get this thing back to the NCAA tournament. They made it last year, but they were essentially a dream shot by Cameron Chapman against Indiana in the Big Ten tournament away from going to the NIT and missing the NCAA for the second straight year. So, this year, I think they need to be a top 5 team in the Big Ten, get into the NCAA tournament without a white knuckle selection Sunday, and kind of steer this thing back onto the track. So it's a very, very important year for John Beilein, who recently received an extension. He signed through 2021, I think, off the top of my head, and yeah, there's been, I think the fan base is just getting a little uneasy with the last 2 years and not capitalizing on that Final Four, like I mentioned. So it's a big season for Michigan for sure.
Yeah, interesting. You brought up that shot in the Big Ten tournament, and it's amazing how one shot can really change the perspective on a season. Michigan's only had 2 games this year. They beat Howard in their first game, and I guess what was technically a piece of the 2K Classic, but they also beat Ooey Pooey the other night. Talking about the Howard game, it seemed like the storyline coming out of that was that Howard used this 1-4 matchup zone, which stifled Michigan in the first 5 minutes. Michigan took the lead at about 12 minutes left in the first half and didn't really look back from there. Were there any other storylines from that game? What was your impression of how Michigan handled that lengthy and athletic defense of Howard University?
Yeah, I mean, I'm only really able to go off of what I read and saw and heard from it. I was in Hawaii covering Michigan State, Arizona that same night. But for that game, I think more than anything, look, they're playing Howard. They're playing a team that kind of plays a wonky defense, and there's only so much you can really take from it. What they needed more was to start kind of defining their roles, and I still think that's a work in progress. After the first 2 games, this isn't a group that has, a lot of starting positions up for grabs or anything like that, but, Muhammad Ali Abdul-Rahman missed an exhibition game with a minor injury, nothing big, and so they needed to get him back into the lineup, and that was his first game, and he really didn't do much. He only took like 2 2-point field goals. There's still a front court battle between Moritz Wagner and Mark Donnell. Wagner is a very promising sophomore from Germany who is still a bit of a liability on defense, while Donnell is more of a what you see is what you get senior who's actually played pretty consistently in the first 2 games. But the biggest thing from the first 2 games for Michigan by far has been the emergence of DJ Wilson as a stretch 4 who can, on defense, use his length. He's 6'10", 6'11", with like a 7'2" wingspan, and has put on some muscle since he got to Michigan. But in his first 2 years, he was injured, and then he was completely enigmatic last year. He's certainly emerging as a rotation player that could perhaps crack the lineup, because on the flip side of DJ Wilson's emergence has been Duncan Robinson kind of disappearing a little bit here. He's been in a preseason shooting slump. For anyone who doesn't know him, over the first half of last year, he was the best three-point shooter in the country. He shot like 55% over the first half of last season from beyond the arc. He's a Division III transfer from Williams College. Got into Big Ten play and kind of couldn't get around defenses. He lost his touch. He lost his momentum. And he was, he's one of those guys, if he's not making perimeter shots, he's not giving you much. And he's been in a preseason slump, and he has struggled, frankly, in the first 2 games. And there's now some chatter here that there could be a change coming in the starting lineup, and it would be a pretty significant move for Beilein to do. Now, the difference would be, how does Duncan Robinson look coming off the bench? Because that could be a pretty good look. If he can find his stroke and he's coming off the bench, he could be a game changer with his three-point shot. That was a long answer. I don't even know if it answered your question. But.
No, it did. It did. Well, no, and you brought up a great point. Looking over the box scores of the first couple of Michigan games, the name that jumps off the paper is DJ Wilson, and I doubt a lot of Marquette fans have too much familiarity with him. But you look across the line for him, and it's about a 6'10", 6'11" junior, 240 pounds, and that's the type of forward that strikes fear into the heart of Marquette fans. Marquette is not a deep team in the front court. We have Luke Fisher, who's far and away our most talented player and a locked-in starter. When you're talking about DJ Wilson, what's his go-to move? What are kind of his go-to set of skills that he really excels at, in addition to, I assume, rebounding?
Well, last year he was kind of a catch and chuck. He wasn't a catch and shoot. He was catch and chuck as a redshirt freshman last year, where he was kind of this big guy that, like, you see him go through pregame warm-ups, and you're like, that has to be the best player on the team. He looks like a monster. And then he would proceed to then float around the three-point line, take shots, barely put the ball on the deck, never attack the rim unless it was just a wide-open dunk. But this year he's kind of showing more. This Marquette game is a big game for him because, it's very nice that he did that against Howard and IUPUI, but I think people really want to see if he can actually do anything against a real team like Marquette. He grabbed 13 rebounds yesterday. That's an insane number for DJ Wilson compared to what people were expecting from him this year. Is he that assertive in a game like this? He needs to do so. Everything's going in the right direction for him. So he could possibly rubber stamp his spot down there. He does have a nice little in-between game, and he can put the ball on the floor. He can pass it. He's comfortable away from the basket. He doesn't have a great array of low post moves. That's more of a Wagner thing for Michigan. But he can just do a lot. He's naturally gifted. He can jump out of the gym. He's strong. He's got that wingspan. He can play above the rim. It's just a matter of him doing it.
Just kind of looking, taking the wider view of both teams, it would appear to me that both teams are very, at least at this point in this year, certainly Marquette is guard-oriented more so than last year, and I would assume the same for Michigan. As you look at the Michigan roster, where do you see the strength lying in what they're going to rely on game in and game out to get them production anywhere across the stat line? What do you think those positions are?
If they're going to find success in a game like this against Marquette and a game the next night against SMU or Pitt and moving forward into Big Ten play, it's really, we've talked about all these other guys, it's really on Derek Walton Jr. and Zach Urban. Seniors have both played like 100 games. They can do a lot of stuff. They've been there, but they're kind of guys who have always said the right thing and been expected to do this and expected to do that, and it's just never really completely come together. Urban, in terms of what they can do this year, do it well. Urban is a three-point shooter. He hasn't shot particularly well yet from beyond the arc this year, but more so, his game is really developing nicely in the mid-range. They like to run him off of high screens for some step-in jumpers. He can hit, he can knock down those 18-foot shots from just inside the arc at the top of the key all day long, and has been doing so in the first two games. He can put it on the deck a little bit. That's not his strength, but he is, put him in a ball screen, work for him to get jump shots. That's what they're going to look for him to do, and that's how he scores. He's often asked to defend teams opposing power forwards, but now with a guy like DJ Wilson coming up, that can kind of alleviate that a little bit for him, which is really good for Zach moving forward. Derek Walton is probably the best rebounding guard in the Big Ten. He averages like 6-7 boards a game, and he's got great hops. He's 6 foot, but he kind of has a nose for the ball. He's a gritty guy. He's tough. He distributes the ball well. Has a good assist turnover ratio. The weird thing about Derek is he is a true shooting guard playing point guard. He's a really good perimeter shooter who likes to work off the ball, catch and shoot, and can shoot a high percentage on threes. But if you get him going to the basket, his shooting numbers have plummeted the last 2 years. He just doesn't convert going to the basket. It's kind of been a very odd stigma that's been attached to him these last 2 years that he's trying to work through. But he gets to play a little bit off the ball now because Michigan's added Xavier Simpson, who's a really promising freshman point guard, and Beeline is interested in them playing together, which means there's 2 6-foot guards in the backcourt. But I think Beeline likes offense over defense and will take Walton being able to kind of what he calls hunting shots at 2 guard while Xavier runs it at the 1.
So one of the things we like to do here on this podcast is make predictions for the game coming up. Understanding that it's still early in the season and we don't have a big sample size for either of these teams. What do you think is going to happen this Thursday in the 2K Classic between Marquette and Michigan? How do you think this contest shakes out, and what do you think is one of the big determinants of it?
I like Michigan in this game. I haven't seen a ton of Marquette, though, to be completely honest with you. I know they played fairly well in their first game, and athletes, they like to do some up-tempo stuff. But I think, this is one of the few games that Michigan might actually have a rebounding edge. You'd probably be able to tell me that better than I could, but I believe Michigan could actually rebound well in this game. And I guess a lot of it's going to depend on Michigan. As always, if they're hitting shots, sometimes this is a group that can shoot themselves out of games. And Michigan last year was simply woeful defensively, and they're still trying to figure that out. And a lot of teams, if you want to beat Michigan, if you just go at them head on, sometimes you can just eat them up by just going one-on-one. Just going right at the basket. Last year was just blow by after blow by, and it's been seen a little bit in the first 2 games. But I kind of like the direction of this Michigan team right now. I think they have some positives going for them, and yeah, I just think they just have probably a little bit more balanced, experienced talent than Marquette does at the moment. And so I would take Michigan probably in a tight game, but that's complete guesswork. I have no idea. If Marquette comes out and goes right at them and gets really physical, they could just as easily get Michigan on its heels, and then it's over from there. That was proven time and time again last year, and this is essentially the same exact Michigan team as it was last year.
I think John Beeline and his coaching staff do a tremendous job year in and year out, and I know you said the pressure's on a little bit more this year, but I expect it to be a great game no matter who wins. I think it'll be an up and down battle. Brendan, we appreciate you joining the show today. Appreciate you sharing some of your knowledge and thoughts with us on the Michigan basketball program. Best of luck with your travels, and we'll hope to talk to you again sometime soon. Thanks for joining the show.
Very good. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for us today. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back in a few days to recap the 2K Classic and Marquette's games against Michigan in either Pitt or SMU. Signing off for all the fellas, I'm Mike Lavender. We'll talk to you soon here on the Real Chili Podcast.